Dear children, today in the first session of our English class for class 10, we will discuss the lesson Nelson Mandela Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela himself from the textbook First Flight. This lesson is a description of the day when Nelson Mandela was inaugurated as the first black president of South Africa in the year 1994. And it also deals with how Nelson Mandela, according to his own description, how he became a revolutionary who fought against the repressive regime or government of the white population of South Africa. The government that was functioning in South Africa after the year 1994 was based on apartheid. Now, apartheid is a political system that separates people according to their race. In this kind of a political system or form of government, people are discriminated against on the basis of their race. In South Africa, there are mainly two races. One, the minority white population, and the other, the black African population, who are in a majority. There is one another section of the African population. They are the Indians who were taken to South Africa by their European masters for menial work long back. Now, Mandela was one of the most freedom fighters, one of the foremost freedom fighters of the struggle for freedom of South Africa from the white oppressive regime. Nelson Mandela is the founding father of South Africa. He is a modern democratic hero. He is an icon of social equality. His name has become synonymous with social justice. Just as Mahatma Gandhi is the father of the Indian nation, Nelson Mandela is referred to as the father of the South African nation. Mandela was a member of the African National Congress, and for participating in the movement against the repressive and oppressive regime of the white population of South Africa, he was arrested in the year 1962 by the government and was put in jail for a period of 27 years. He was released in the year 1990, and after that, democratic elections were held in South Africa in 1994, in which the black and other colored population of the country participated, along with the whites, in electing their representatives. The African National Congress got a majority by winning 252 out of the 400 seats of the South African Parliament. After winning of majority, Nelson Mandela was sworn in as the first black president of South Africa. In the inauguration ceremony, Mandela was formally presented before the public as a leader of the African nation. The inauguration ceremony took place in the Union Buildings Amphitheatre of Pretoria. The Union Buildings are the official seat of the South African government, and they also house the offices of the President of South Africa. On 10th December 2013, the Union Buildings Amphitheatre was renamed the Nelson Mandela Amphitheatre. Pretoria is the capital of South Africa. The inauguration ceremony was attended by politicians and dignitaries, that is, persons with high rank or position, from more than 140 countries around the world. All the peoples of the world were overjoyed by the overthrowing of the oppressive white regime in South Africa and by the attaining of freedom by the oppressed and suppressed black population of South Africa. For a period of over 3 centuries of white domination, the blacks were subjected to inhuman indignities. They were denied their basic human rights. And on the day of inauguration, therefore, the people of South Africa were jubilant. They were overjoyed. They were expressing their happiness because of the great success they had attained after a long and hard struggle of 300 years. The blacks, the whites, and other colored peoples, like the ones of Indian origin, celebrated together on the streets of South Africa. More than 100,000 or 1 lakh South African men, women, and children of all races sang and danced with joy on that day, because it was a victory in attaining of freedom by the black African people and other colored people. It was a victory for peace, justice, and human dignity. Now, let us discuss the lesson. We will first deal with the first paragraph of the lesson, which reads just 10th May dawned bright and clear. For the past few days, I had been pleasantly besieged by dignitaries and world leaders who were coming to pay their respects for the inauguration. The inauguration would be the largest gathering ever of international leaders on South African soil. Now, it was the 10th of May in the year 1994, when after the dark night there was the brightness of a new day. The new day had dawned. It was a bright and clear morning. It is, in fact, symbolic of the new beginning that had dawned upon the South African people. They had been able to attain freedom after a long, dark night of oppression and struggle. Nelson Mandela says that for the past few days, that means few days before the inauguration, before he was presented officially in a special ceremony before the public as a leader, he had been pleasantly besieged by or surrounded closely by dignitaries, that is, people of high rank or position, and also world leaders who were coming to pay their respects to him before the inauguration. Lots of world leaders and dignitaries had come to South Africa to pay their respects to Nelson Mandela. Pay their respects here is an idiom. In fact, it is pay one's respects to somebody. It means to visit somebody as a sign of respect for him or her. So leaders from all over the world and dignitaries respect Nelson Mandela because of the intense struggle that he had to undergo. He had to suffer horrible treatment in the hands of the South African authorities in jail. He was badly tortured, but he didn't lose heart. He didn't break down. He didn't give up. He continued to struggle for the freedom of the South African people and was ultimately successful in his efforts. So, he was deserving of respect. And the dignitaries, the leaders from all around the world, were landing in South Africa and were visiting the great leader Nelson Mandela to pay their respects to him. The inauguration would be the largest gathering ever of international leaders in South Africa. This inauguration, this formal presentation of the man Nelson Mandela to the public at large would be the largest gathering ever on the South African soil. Never before in the history of South Africa ever had gathered on its soil such a galaxy of international leaders. They were world leaders and not just leaders. They were people who led the way for the nations of the world. They were people who showed the way to the nations of the world how to run a democratic form of government, how to run the economy so as to bring maximum economic benefit to their people, how to maintain good relations with different countries, with one's neighbors, how to come to the aid of the nations in times of crisis. So such leaders were present on that occasion. They were international leaders. That is something unusual, a rare event in the history of the world. It was a historic occasion for the people of South Africa. In fact, for the entire world community, because it was a victory for freedom, for peace, for justice and human dignity. The ceremonies, that is, now we are going to the second paragraph. The ceremonies took place in the lovely sandstone amphitheater formed by the Union buildings in Pretoria. Now, a ceremony. What is a ceremony? A ceremony is a formal act or series of formal acts performed on a public occasion. They follow certain accepted rules of behavior. The ceremonies took place in the lovely sandstone amphitheater formed by the Union Buildings in Pretoria. So it was an amphitheater, the place where the inauguration took place. And this amphitheater was formed by the Union Buildings in Pretoria. That means the buildings that house the offices of this government of South Africa and the offices of the President of South Africa in the capital, Pretoria. So, an amphitheater is a building without a roof, with many rows of seats rising in steps, typical of ancient Greece and Rome. Amphitheaters were very popular in Rome, where gladiators fought bloody battles against one another. These fights involved great cruelty. You might have seen such things in films. One such film is The Gladiator. So for decades, the Union Buildings had been the seat of white supremacy. And now it was the site of a rainbow gathering of different colors and nations for installation of South Africa's first democratic, non-racial government. 1 decade is equal to 10 years. So, for decades means number of such 10 years. The Union Buildings had been the seat of white supremacy. From these buildings, the white rulers of South Africa had ruled over the entire South African nation. These white rulers were supreme. They held the position of the highest power, authority, or status. They were above everything. On the day of the inauguration, it was the site of a rainbow gathering of different colors and nations. A rainbow gathering means a beautiful coming together of various peoples, like the colors in a rainbow. So different people from different parts of the world, from different nations, had gathered there in that amphitheater. And so it has been described as a rainbow gathering. Rainbow gathering is an idiom, and South Africa's first democratic, non-racial government was installed. Installation means the new government of South Africa was placed in a new position of authority by performing a usual ceremony of oath-taking by the leaders. Rest we will continue in the next session.